Studies Section 8. Trade and Multinational Corporations. Introduction. The basic necessary elements of a theory of multinational firms can best be seen by looking at an example. Consider the Nigerian operation of European chemical company PZ Cussons PLC, for example, sells many chemicals in Nigeria, but nearly all those chemical products are manufactured in Nigeria. This arrangement is familiar, but we should realize that there are two obvious alternatives. On one side, instead of producing in Nigeria, the United Kingdom firms could produce in the United Kingdom and export to the Nigerian market. On the other side, the whole market could be served by Nigerian producers of chemical products. Why, then, do we see this particular arrangement in which the same firms produce in different countries? Second, why is production in different locations done by the same firm rather than by separate firms? This is known for reasons that will become apparent in a moment as a question of internalization. We need a theory of location to explain why Nigeria does not import its chemical from the United Kingdom. We need a theory of internalization to explain why Nigeria's chemical industry is not independently controlled. The theory of location is not a difficult one in principle. It is, in fact, just the theory of trade that we developed in chapters 2 through 6. The location of production is often determined by resources. Aluminium mining must be located where the bauxite is. Aluminium smelting near cheap electricity. Many computer manufacturers locate their skill-intensive design facilities in where there is abundance of capital and their labor-intensive assembly plants in populous countries. The modern theory of multinational enterprises. Alternatively, transport costs and other barriers to trade may determine location. United Kingdom firms produce locally for the Nigerian market partly to reduce transport costs, since the models that sell well in Nigeria are often quite different from those that sell well in the United Kingdom. It makes sense to have separate production facilities and to put them on different continents. As these examples reveal, the factors that determine a multinational corporation's decisions about where to produce are probably not much different from those that determine the pattern of trade in general. The theory of internationalization. Take 2. The theory of internalization is another matter. Why not have independent auto companies in Europe? We may note first that there are always important transactions between a multinational's operations in different countries. The output of one subsidiary is often an input into the production of another, or technology developed in one country may be used in others, or management may usefully coordinate the activities of plants in several countries. These transactions are what tie the multinational firm together, and the firm presumably exists to facilitate these transactions. Take 2. To facilitate these transactions. But international transactions need not be carried out inside a firm. Components can be sold in an open market, and technology can be licensed to other firms. Multinationals exist because it turns out to be more profitable to carry out these transactions within a firm rather than between firms. This is why the motivate for multinationals is referred to as internalization. We have defined a concept, but we have not yet explained what gives rise to internalization, why some transactions are more profitably conducted within a firm rather than within a firm rather than between firms. Here there are a variety of theories, none as well grounded either in theory or in evidence as our theories of location. We may know two influential views, however, about why activities in different countries may usefully be integrated in a single firm. The first view stresses the advantages of internalization for technology transfer. Technology, broadly defined as any kind of economically useful knowledge, can sometimes be sold or licensed. There are important difficulties in doing this. However, often the technology involved in, say, running a factory has never been written down. It is embodied in the knowledge of a group of individuals and cannot be packaged and sold. Also, it is difficult for a prospective buyer to know how much knowledge is worth. If the buyer knew as much as the seller, there would be no need to buy. Finally, property rights in knowledge are often hard to establish. If a European firm licenses technology to a Nigerian firm, other Nigerian firms may legally imitate that technology. All these problems may be reduced if a firm, instead of selling technology, set about capturing the returns from the technology in other countries by setting up foreign subsidiaries. The second view stresses the advantages of internalization for vertical integration. If one firm, the upstream firm, produces a good that is used as an input for another firm, the downstream firm, a number of problems can result. For one thing, if each has a monopolist position, they may get into a conflict as the downstream firm tries to hold the price down while the upstream firm tries to raise it. There may be problems of coordination if demand or supply is uncertain. Finally, a fluctuating price may impose excessive risk on one or the other party. If the upstream and downstream firms are combined into a single vertically integrated firm, these problems may be avoided or at least reduced. It should be clear that these views are by no means as rigorously worked out as the analysis of trade carried out elsewhere in this book. The economic theory of organizations, which is what we are talking about when we try to develop a theory of multinational corporations, is still in its infancy. This is particularly unfortunate because, in practice, multinationals are a subject of heated controversy, praised by some for generating economic growth, accused by others of creating poverty. Multinational firms in practice. Multinational firms play an important part in world trade and investment. For example, about half of us import are transactions between related parties. By this, we mean that the buyer and the seller are to a significant extent owned and presumably controlled by the same firm. Thus, half of U.S. imports can be regarded as transactions between branches of multinational firms. At the same time, 24% of U.S. assets abroad consist of the value of foreign subsidiaries of U.S. firms, so U.S. international trade and investment, while not dominated by multinational firms, are to an important extent conducted by such firms. Multinational firms may, of course, be either domestic or foreign-owned. Foreign-owned multinational firms play an important role in most economies and an increasingly important role in the United States. Table 7.1 compares the role of foreign-owned firms in the manufacturing sectors of three major economies. The table is illuminating, especially for Americans who are not used to the idea of working for foreign-owned, although comparable statistics do not exist. It turns out that the real exception among major economies is Japan, which has very little foreign ownership. This is not because of overt legal restrictions. On paper, foreigners are free to open plants in Japan and buy Japanese companies, with only a few exceptions. But cultural obstacles, such as the unwillingness of many Japanese to work for foreign companies, and perhaps also red tape barriers thrown up by bureaucrats, have prevented large-scale operation of foreign-based multinationals. The important question, however, is what difference multinationals make. With only a limited understanding of why multinationals exist, this is a hard question to answer. Nonetheless, the existing theory suggests some preliminary answers. Notice first that much of what multinationals do could be done without multinationals. Although perhaps not as easily, two examples are the shift of labor-intensive production from industrial countries to labor-abundant nations and capital flows from capital-abundant countries to capital-scarce countries. Multinational firms are sometimes the agents of these changes and are therefore either praised or condemned for their actions. But these shifts reflect the location aspect of our theory of multinationals, which is really no different from ordinary trade theory. If multinationals were not there, the same things would still happen, though perhaps not to the same extent. This observation leads international economists to attribute less significance to multinational enterprise than most lay observers. Notice, too, that in a broad sense, what multinational corporations do by creating organizations that extend across national boundaries is similar to the effect of trade and simple factor mobility. That is, it is a form of international economic integration by analogy with the other forms of international integration we have studied. We would expect multinational enterprise to produce overall gains, but to produce income distribution effect that leaves some people worse off. These income distribution effects are probably mostly effects within rather than between countries. To sum up, multinational corporations probably are not as important a factor in the world economy as their visibility would suggest. Their role is neither more nor less likely to be beneficial than other international linkages. This does not, however, prevent them from being cast in the role of villains or, more rarely, heroes, as we will see in our discussion of trade and development. This is the end of study section 8. Thanks for listening.